Our top story, President Rodrigo Duterte breaking his silence on the ramming of a Filipino fishing boat by a Chinese vessel in Recto Bank. He says it would be foolish to go to war with China over a maritime accident. For Agriculture Secretary Manny Piñol, it was just an isolated incident. And we now have back on the line Secretary Piñol himself. He was designated as chairman of the government's response on the Recto Bank incident. Good morning, Secretary Piñol.
Morning, Ria.
All right, so let me ask you again. You say that this was an isolated incident. What made it so? In the past, have there also been similar reports of harassment of Filipino fishermen in the West Philippine Sea?
Well, actually, yesterday I invited the owner of the boat, Mrs. Arlene de la Torre, and the only reliable witness to the incident, the cook, who was the only person who was awake at the time of the incident, Richard Blaza. And I asked Blaza whether there were incidents in the past where they were harassed by Chinese fishermen or Chinese fishing vessels in the area. And he said none. This was the first incident involving a Chinese vessel in that area in Recto Bank. And he said that in the past they fished side by side with the Vietnamese and the Chinese in the area. Of course, it was wrong for the Vietnamese and the Chinese to be there, but that's another issue. The fact is that there has never been any incident, similar incident in the past, that would, create a pattern somehow. So my statement was that this was an isolated incident. This was the first of its kind in the area, and it has to be deeply investigated. Although the Department of Agriculture, of course, raised the issue on why the Chinese fishing vessel abandoned the fishermen who were in the water after the accident. This is an issue that should be thoroughly investigated, and it should be established whether the ramming or the elision, as the experts call it, was intentionally done or was just accidental.
Well, speaking of investigation, the president said that we have to wait for the results of an investigation before making conclusions. Although DFA Secretary Teddy Boy Locsin said last week that he already got a report from a task force that looked into the incident and that we've already filed a diplomatic protest. What else do we still need to know when we have aired our sentiments against the incident?
Well, number one, it has to be established. The fact is, a Filipino fishing boat was hit by a Chinese vessel. The first question that should be settled is that, was it intentional or was it accidental? That's the first issue that should be considered, because from there you could establish malice or innocence. Meaning, if it was not intentional, then remunerations, apologies are in order. And but you should understand why the president actually waited for these reports to come in before he issued a statement yesterday. And based on the testimonies of the witnesses, the main witness, Richard Blaza, it would appear that the whole incident actually was an accident. That was his statement yesterday. And I interviewed him personally, and I have the video recording of that interview, and I have his affidavit. Now, I am not going to prejudge the case, but Richard Blaza said that they were actually anchored in an area in the Recto Bank at about 30 fathoms. People should understand that in the Recto Bank, actually, there is no island there. It's just a shallow portion of the West Philippine Sea. And the most shallow portion there where they dropped anchor was about 50 meters deep. And they were fishing. So they were afloat, actually. And at the time of the accident, Richard Blaza told me that they had only two lights in the boat. One in the captain's deck, where the captain was sleeping, and the other one in the kitchen where he was cooking rice for the fishermen who were about to, who would be jumping off from the ship to fish, hand line, at about 6 a.m. in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. And while he was actually resting, he saw this oncoming vessel with lights only in the captain's deck. That's what he said. And when he saw that the vessel was coming towards them, he ran to the captain and and warned the captain, who tried to start the engine of the boat, but it was too late. They were already hit by the Chinese vessel. According to Blasa, shortly after impact, the Chinese vessel stopped and then lighted the boat, the ship, and then lighted them with flashlights. And they turned around, and suddenly, when they saw several small bancas afloat, because the fishing boat actually, Jumper, is the mother boat. It has 19 small bancas, which are paddle bancas actually, which the fishermen use in fishing.
But sir, I guess the other question, sorry to cut you off there, but the big question, of course, is why was the Chinese vessel there in the first place?
I guess they were also fishing in the area.
But they're not supposed to be there, is that correct?
Yeah, they're not supposed to be there, but that's another issue.
Okay, the other issue is, if we do say that this is an accident, do you think it's an accident that they also left 22 Filipino fishermen in the water?
No, that is precisely the issue that we're raising. Assuming, for the sake of argument, that it was an accident.
Right.
There is no justifiable reason for them to abandon the fishermen while they were in the water. And that is the issue that we are raising right now.
Right. So Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles said that you also agree, as you just said, that the incident was an elision, not a collision. And the president said it's a maritime accident. But there's a growing perception among netizens in some sectors that the government is toning down the response to the ramming of a Filipino fishing boat. What's your response to this, sir?
I beg to ask them, what response are you expecting from government? Declare war against China? The ambassador of China will be summoned to the palace, I believe, today. And that is the proper way of dealing with incidents like these. We have a leader in the palace, not a demagogue or a rabble-rouser. A leader must be careful with his statements because the implications of his actions in this incident actually carry a lot of weight. It would have implications on our economy. It would have implications on agriculture because China is our number one export destination for our agricultural products. So we're not saying that we should not take action. If indeed this was an accident or this was an incident that was intentionally done, then we should take action. But we should not rush to decisions without getting all the sides of the story involved in this incident.
All right, sir. On to a completely different issue. Authorities recently seized at the Clark International Airport canned meat products that actually tested positive for African swine fever. Can we say, however, that the Philippines remains ASF-free?
Yes, we are. And we hope that we will remain this way because if not, it would cause the devastation of a 200 billion industry and the source of livelihood of many Filipino farmers. That's why we have made steps actually to really implement stricter measures in quarantine. We have already fielded canines in the airports, but I believe that the canines would not be foolproof. So I have actually proposed the acquisition of X-rays, which would be used in, scanning packages, hand-carried items brought in by returning Filipinos or tourists coming from ASF-positive countries. This is the only way we could ensure that we will be able to prevent the entry of the disease in the country.
All right. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us this morning. That was Agriculture Secretary Manny Piñol.